The biting wind whipped through the city streets, carrying with it the scent of exhaust fumes and the faint, underlying dampness of urban decay. It was a Tuesday, a day like any other, yet for some it held the potential for profound shifts, unseen seismic movements beneath the surface of everyday existence. Alex shivered, pulling the worn collar of his threadbare jacket tighter around his neck. His breath plumed in the frigid air, a transient ghost of his own fleeting presence in this bustling metropolis. He sat on a cold concrete bench, strategically positioned near the entrance of a bustling supermarket, not begging, but simply observing, a silent sentinel in the chaotic symphony of city life. His eyes, though often clouded with weariness, held a depth that belied his current circumstances. They were the eyes of a man who had seen much, experienced more, and, perhaps, was currently enduring a self-imposed purgatory. His beard, unkempt and flecked with gray, framed a face etched with the lines of hardship, but also, paradoxically, a quiet dignity. People hurried past him, a blur of faces, most averting their gaze, others offering a fleeting glance of pity or disdain. He was invisible, a phantom in plain sight, a stark reminder of the social chasm that divided the fortunate from the forgotten. Today, however, felt different. A subtle hum vibrated in the air, a premonition, perhaps, of something about to unfold. Alex had learned to trust these subtle internal tremors, these whispers of fate that often preceded significant events in his unconventional life. He wasn't sure what it was, but a peculiar tension settled in his chest, a mix of apprehension and a strange, almost eager anticipation. He watched a young mother struggle with a stroller, a businessman bark into his phone, a group of teenagers laughing raucously, their joy a stark contrast to his own quiet solitude. The world spun on, oblivious to the drama simmering within him, or the quiet potential of the day. Then she appeared, an elderly woman, her back slightly stooped, her silver hair neatly pinned, emerged from the supermarket pushing a shopping cart laden with groceries. Her coat, though old-fashioned, was impeccably clean, and a small, delicate scarf was tied around her neck. There was an air of resilience about her, a quiet strength that emanated from her every deliberate, careful step. Eleanor was meticulously slow, her movements precise, as if each step was a carefully choreographed dance to avoid calamity. She clutched her purse tightly, her knuckles white, her gaze fixed on the uneven pavement ahead. The world for Eleanor had become a series of potential hazards, a loose paving stone, a sudden gust of wind, an impatient pedestrian. She lived alone, her husband having passed away 5 years prior, and her children, though loving, lived in distant cities, their visits infrequent. Her independence was her most cherished possession, and she guarded it fiercely, even as her body, with each passing year, seemed intent on betraying her. As Eleanor approached a particularly cracked section of the sidewalk, a sudden, jarring jolt sent a ripple of alarm through her. One of the wheels of her shopping cart snagged in a crevice, bringing her to an abrupt halt. The force of the sudden stop, combined with her already precarious balance, sent her reeling. Her groceries, once neatly packed, began to cascade from the cart, a torrent of fruits, vegetables, and canned goods scattering across the grimy pavement. A carton of milk burst open, its white contents spreading like a mournful stain. A glass jar of pickles shattered, releasing a sharp vinegary aroma into the cold air. Eleanor gasped, a small choked sound of distress. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of fear and humiliation. She tried to regain her balance, her frail hands flailing, but it was too late. Her feet slipped on the spilled milk, and with a soft cry, she stumbled, falling heavily onto her side. The impact sent a sharp pain shooting through her hip, and a wave of nausea washed over her. She lay there, stunned, amidst the wreckage of her weekly shop, feeling utterly vulnerable, exposed, and utterly alone. Tears welled in her eyes, not just from the pain, but from the crushing weight of her helplessness. People continued to rush by, a river of humanity. Some paused, casting a quick, hesitant glance, but most simply stepped around her, their faces a mask of polite indifference or hurried impatience. No one stopped. No one offered a hand. The city, in its relentless pursuit of progress, seemed to have no time for the fallen. A profound loneliness, sharper than the cold, pierced Eleanor's heart. The biting wind whipped through the city streets, carrying with it the scent of exhaust fumes and the faint, underlying dampness of urban decay. It was a Tuesday, a day like any other, yet for some, it held the potential for profound shifts, unseen seismic movements beneath the surface of everyday existence. Alex shivered, pulling the worn collar of his threadbare jacket tighter around his neck. His breath plumed in the frigid air, a transient ghost of his own fleeting presence in this bustling metropolis. He sat on a cold concrete bench, strategically positioned near the entrance of a bustling supermarket, not begging, but simply observing, a silent sentinel in the chaotic symphony of city life. His eyes, though often clouded with weariness, held a depth that belied his current circumstances. They were the eyes of a man who had seen much, experienced more, and, perhaps, was currently enduring a self-imposed purgatory. His beard, unkempt and flecked with gray, framed a face etched with the lines of hardship, but also, paradoxically, a quiet dignity. People hurried past him, a blur of faces, most averting their gaze, others offering a fleeting glance of pity or disdain. He was invisible, a phantom in plain sight, a stark reminder of the social chasm that divided the fortunate from the forgotten. Today, however, felt different. A subtle hum vibrated in the air, a premonition, perhaps, of something about to unfold. Alex had learned to trust these subtle internal tremors, these whispers of fate that often preceded significant events in his unconventional life. He wasn't sure what it was, but a peculiar tension settled in his chest, a mix of apprehension and a strange, almost eager anticipation. He watched a young mother struggle with a stroller, a businessman bark into his phone, a group of teenagers laughing raucously, their joy a stark contrast to his own quiet solitude. The world spun on, oblivious to the drama simmering within him, or the quiet potential of the day. Then she appeared, an elderly woman, her back slightly stooped, her silver hair neatly pinned, emerged from the supermarket pushing a shopping cart laden with groceries. Her coat, though old-fashioned, was impeccably clean, and a small, delicate scarf was tied around her neck. There was an air of resilience about her, a quiet strength that emanated from her every deliberate, careful step. Eleanor was meticulously slow, her movements precise, as if each step was a carefully choreographed dance to avoid calamity. She clutched her purse tightly, her knuckles white, her gaze fixed on the uneven pavement ahead. The world for Eleanor had become a series of potential hazards, a loose paving stone, a sudden gust of wind, an impatient pedestrian. She lived alone, her husband having passed away 5 years prior, and her children, though loving, lived in distant cities, their visits infrequent. Her independence was her most cherished possession, and she guarded it fiercely, even as her body, with each passing year, seemed intent on betraying her. As Eleanor approached a particularly cracked section of the sidewalk, a sudden, jarring jolt sent a ripple of alarm through her. One of the wheels of her shopping cart snagged in a crevice, bringing her to an abrupt halt. The force of the sudden stop, combined with her already precarious balance, sent her reeling. Her groceries, once neatly packed, began to cascade from the cart, a torrent of fruits, vegetables, and canned goods scattering across the grimy pavement. A carton of milk burst open, its white contents spreading like a mournful stain. A glass jar of pickles shattered, releasing a sharp vinegary aroma into the cold air. Eleanor gasped, a small, choked sound of distress. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of fear and humiliation. She tried to regain her balance, her frail hands flailing, but it was too late. Her feet slipped on the spilled milk, and with a soft cry, she stumbled, falling heavily onto her side. The impact sent a sharp pain shooting through her hip, and a wave of nausea washed over her. She lay there, stunned, amidst the wreckage of her weekly shop, feeling utterly vulnerable, exposed, and utterly alone. Tears welled in her eyes, not just from the pain, but from the crushing weight of her helplessness. People continued to rush by, a river of humanity. Some paused, casting a quick, hesitant glance, but most simply stepped around her, their faces a mask of polite indifference or hurried impatience. No one stopped. No one offered a hand. The city, in its relentless pursuit of progress, seemed to have no time for the fallen. A profound loneliness, sharper than the cold, pierced Eleanor's heart.
"Please," Eleanor insisted, reaching into her purse with trembling fingers, "let me give you something for your trouble, for your kindness." She pulled out a crumpled $5 bill. It wasn't much, but it was all she had in her wallet for immediate expenses. Alex, however, gently pushed her hand back. "No, ma'am, that's not necessary. I helped because you needed it, not for money." His sincerity was palpable, a stark contrast to the transactional nature of so much of city life. Eleanor was taken aback. She had expected him to snatch it, to be eager for any small sum. His refusal, his genuine refusal, struck her deeply. It challenged all her preconceived notions, all the stereotypes she had, however unconsciously, harbored about people living on the streets. This was not a beggar. This was a good man. "But," she started, still wanting to offer something, anything. "Truly, it's fine," Alex reiterated, his smile softening. "Just be careful on your way home, all right?" Eleanor looked at him, truly looked at him for the first time. She saw the weariness, the hunger in his eyes, but also an undeniable spark of humanity, a quiet strength that resonated within her. She saw not a homeless man, but a man who had helped her when no one else would. "My name is Eleanor," she said, extending a hand that still trembled slightly. Alex hesitated for a fraction of a second, then took her hand, his grip warm and firm. "Alex," he replied. "Alex," she repeated, letting the name settle. "Thank you, Alex. I won't forget this." She paused, then, on an impulse born of genuine feeling, added, Where do you stay?" Alex gestured vaguely. "Around, wherever I can find a spot." He kept his answers minimal, a strategy to avoid revealing too much. His current identity was a carefully constructed facade, a protective shell. "Well," Eleanor said, a thought slowly forming in her mind, a daring, unconventional thought. Could you perhaps help me get my groceries home? I'm still a bit shaky." It was an excuse, a transparent one, but it was also a genuine request for continued companionship, for the reassuring presence of the only person who had shown her kindness in her moment of need. Alex looked at her, then at the loaded cart, then back at her earnest, hopeful face. He knew she was offering him an unspoken invitation, a chance for a brief reprieve from his isolation. He considered his self-imposed rules, his commitment to remaining detached, to observing rather than participating. But then he looked into her eyes and saw a flicker of genuine need, not for physical help alone, but for human connection. He found he couldn't refuse. "Of course, Eleanor," he said, a warmth spreading through him that had nothing to do with the cold. "Lead the way." And so Alex, the homeless man, pushed Eleanor's shopping cart, carefully navigating the cracked pavements and bustling crowds, guiding her slowly towards her modest apartment building. They walked in comfortable silence for a few moments, the rhythmic rumble of the cartwheels providing a gentle counterpoint to the city's cacophony. Eleanor stole glances at Alex, his profile etched against the gray sky, his gaze fixed ahead. She wondered about him, about his story, about the path that had led him to this life. He seemed different somehow from the other homeless people she had occasionally encountered. There was an air of intelligence, a quiet intensity that hinted at a deeper past. As they walked, Eleanor broke the silence. "You know, Alex," she began, her voice softer now, "it's not often you find such kindness in this city anymore. People are always in such a hurry." Alex grunted softly. "It's easy to get lost in the rush, I suppose." He kept his answers minimal, a strategy to avoid revealing too much. His current identity was a carefully constructed facade, a protective shell. Well, lost, perhaps, or simply blind. Blind to the struggles of others. She paused, then continued. "My husband, Arthur, he always used to say that the true measure of a society wasn't in its grand achievements, but in how it treated its most vulnerable." Alex found himself nodding almost imperceptibly. Arthur sounded like a wise man. These were the very sentiments that, in part, propelled him into his current experiment. They reached Eleanor's apartment building, a sturdy brick structure with a small manicured garden out front, a defiant splash of green in the urban landscape. Alex carefully guided the cart up the small ramp to the main entrance. Eleanor fumbled with her keys, her hands still a little shaky. Alex waited patiently, his silent presence an anchor. Would you like to come in for a cup of tea, Alex?" Eleanor asked, her voice tentative, almost shy. "It's cold out, and I'd like to properly thank you."
Alex's internal alarm bells rang. This was beyond his usual parameters. He had committed to observation, to anonymity. Entering someone's home was a step too far, a blurring of the carefully drawn lines he had established for himself. Yet the warmth in Eleanor's eyes, the genuine offer of hospitality, was incredibly tempting. He hadn't had a proper warm drink in weeks, nor had he sat in a comfortable chair, or experienced the simple domesticity of a home. He hesitated, a silent battle raging within him. The desire for warmth, for human connection, fought against his deeply ingrained need for distance. He looked at Eleanor, her small, hopeful face, and saw not a potential complication, but a lonely woman offering a genuine gesture of gratitude. "Just for a moment," he conceded, his voice softer than he intended. "A cup of tea would be very kind." Eleanor's face lit up, a radiant smile transforming her features. "Oh, wonderful. Please come in." She led him into her small, meticulously kept apartment. The air inside was warm, smelling faintly of lavender and old books. It was cozy, filled with trinkets and photographs, a lifetime of memories displayed on every surface. It was a stark contrast to the cold, impersonal anonymity of the streets, and Alex felt a strange, almost overwhelming sense of peace wash over him. "Please, sit," Eleanor urged, gesturing to a worn but comfortable armchair by a window. "Make yourself at home." Alex cautiously sat, sinking into the soft cushions. It felt alien, yet wonderfully comforting. He hadn't sat in such a chair and he couldn't even remember how long. He looked around, taking in the framed photographs on the mantelpiece. A younger Eleanor with a handsome man, presumably Arthur. Smiling children, grandchildren. It was a life lived, a life full of love and connection. Eleanor bustled into the kitchen, the clinking of teacups and the gurgle of a kettle soon filling the quiet space. Alex closed his eyes for a moment, simply absorbing the sounds, the smells, the sensation of warmth. It was a sensory overload, a gentle assault on his carefully constructed fortress of detachment. Soon, Eleanor returned, carrying a tray with 2 steaming mugs of tea and a plate of shortbread cookies. "Here you go, Alex," she said, placing a mug in his hands. "It's Earl Grey, my favorite." He took a sip. The warmth sprayed through his chilled body, a subtle comfort that reached deeper than mere physical sensation. "Thank you, Eleanor. This is wonderful." "Nonsense." She waved her hand. "It's the least I can do. Now, Tell me, Alex, where are you from? You don't sound like you're from around here. Her curiosity was gentle, devoid of intrusive probing. Alex carefully considered his answer. He couldn't reveal too much, but he also didn't want to be entirely evasive to someone who had offered him such kindness. I've moved around a lot, he said vaguely. Traveled quite a bit, but I grew up in a small town, far from the city. Ah, a country boy then, huh? I can see it in your eyes, a certain quietness. She poured herself another cup of tea. So, what brings you to the streets, Alex? If you don't mind me asking, of course. She immediately regretted the bluntness of the question, but her desire to understand outweighed her social graces. Alex took a deep breath. This was the moment. He could lie, deflect, or offer a sliver of truth, carefully wrapped in ambiguity. He looked at Eleanor, her small, hopeful face, and saw not a potential complication, but a lonely woman offering a genuine gesture of gratitude. It's a long story, Eleanor, he began, choosing his words carefully. Let's just say I'm on a journey, a personal quest, if you will, to understand things, to see the world from a different perspective. A quest? How fascinating. And what exactly are you hoping to understand? Humanity, Alex replied, meeting her gaze directly. The true nature of it. When stripped of all the trappings, the expectations, the material possessions, what remains? Eleanor considered this, her brow furrowed in thought. A profound question, Alex. Most people spend their lives acquiring, not stripping away. My Arthur, he was a philosopher in his own way. He believed that true character was revealed not in how much you had, but in how much you gave and how you treated those who could give you nothing in return. Alex smiled, a genuine, unforced smile that softened the hard lines of his face. Arthur sounds like a man I would have liked to have met. They talked for what felt like hours, though it was likely only 30 minutes or so. Eleanor shared stories of Arthur, of her life, her children, her quiet routines. Alex listened intently, offering thoughtful responses, revealing just enough of himself to maintain the conversation without compromising his carefully constructed anonymity. He found himself enjoying this simple act of conversation, the exchange of ideas, the shared human connection. It was a balm to his soul, a stark contrast to the endless internal monologue that usually dominated his days.
Finally, Alex knew it was time to go. He couldn't overstay his welcome, couldn't allow himself to become too comfortable, too attached. "Eleanor," he said, setting down his empty mug, "I truly appreciate your kindness, your hospitality, but I should be going." Eleanor's face fell slightly. "Oh, must you? The company has been lovely." She sighed. "But I understand. You have your quest." She paused, then, a mischievous glint in her eye, added, "Will you be passing this way again, Alex?" Alex looked at her, a complicated mix of emotions swirling within him. He knew he should say no, should maintain his distance, but the thought of never seeing her again, never experiencing this quiet warmth, felt surprisingly bleak. "Perhaps," he said, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "Perhaps I will." "Well, if you do," Eleanor pressed, "you're always welcome to come in for another cup of tea, and maybe, just maybe, I could make you some proper food, a hot meal. It's not right for you to be out in this cold, hungry." Alex felt a pang in his chest. A hot meal. The thought was almost unbearable in its temptation. He hadn't had a home-cooked meal in what felt like an eternity. He had promised himself he would endure the hardships, fully immerse himself in the experience. But Eleanor's offer was so genuine, so devoid of judgment or pity, that it chipped away at his resolve. I will consider it, Eleanor," he said, knowing even as he spoke the words that he would likely take her up on the offer. This woman, with her simple kindness, was slowly, subtly, dismantling the walls he had so painstakingly built around himself. He stood up, the stiffness in his joints a reminder of his current reality. Eleanor walked him to the door. "Thank you again, Alex," she said, her voice soft, "for everything." "Take care, Eleanor," he replied, then stepped out into the cold, bustling street, leaving the warmth and comfort of her apartment behind. The contrast was stark, almost jarring, but this time, as he walked away, a warmth lingered in his chest, a different kind of warmth than the tea, one that emanated from the unexpected connection he had forged. He knew, deep down, that his path had just taken an unexpected detour. Days turned into a week. Alex found himself gravitating toward Eleanor's neighborhood more often than not. He would sit on the same bench, observing, but now with a specific purpose, a silent hope to catch a glimpse of her. And often he would. Eleanor, in turn, would sometimes spot him, and a small, knowing smile would pass between them, a silent acknowledgement of their shared secret. One afternoon, as the sky threatened rain, Eleanor emerged from her building, struggling with a small bag of recycling. Alex, who had been watching from his bench, immediately stood up. "Let me get that for you, Eleanor," he offered, striding toward her. Eleanor's face lit up. "Alex! Just the man I wanted to see. I was just about to make a pot of stew. Would you care to join me?" Her invitation was less hesitant this time, more confident. Alex's stomach rumbled almost audibly. "A stew sounds incredible, Eleanor." And so it became a quiet routine. Alex would help Eleanor with small tasks, carrying groceries, fixing a stubborn window latch, changing a light bulb she couldn't reach. In return, Eleanor would offer him a hot meal, a cup of tea, and most importantly, companionship. Their conversations deepened. Alex, still guarded, began to share more about his quest, talking about the insights he was gaining, the harsh realities he was witnessing, the profound humanity he sometimes encountered in unexpected places. He spoke in generalities, never betraying his true identity or his past, but he spoke with a passion and eloquence that further intrigued Eleanor. Eleanor, in turn, found herself confiding in Alex. She spoke of her loneliness, her fears about aging, her wistful memories of Arthur. Alex listened with an attentiveness that she hadn't experienced since her husband passed. He didn't offer platitudes, he simply listened, his presence a comforting balm. She found herself looking forward to their encounters, to the quiet moments of shared humanity. Alex became more than just a homeless man. He became a friend, a confidant, a quiet anchor in her solitary world. One particularly cold evening, as winter truly began to bite, Alex was helping Eleanor bring in some firewood for her small decorative fireplace. His hands, though used to the cold, were chapped and raw. Eleanor noticed. "Alex," she said, her voice laced with concern, "you can't keep living like this. It's too cold. You'll get sick." He shrugged, a practiced gesture of resignation. "I've managed so far, Eleanor." "Managed is not living," she countered gently. "Please, Alex, I have a spare room. It's small, but it's warm, just for a few nights, until the worst of this cold passes." Her offer was born of genuine care, a deep concern for his well-being.
Alex froze. A spare room. A bed. A roof over his head. Not just for a meal, but for the night. This was the ultimate test of his resolve, the ultimate temptation. He had committed to experiencing the full breadth of homelessness, the cold, the hunger, the vulnerability. To accept shelter, even temporarily, felt like a betrayal of his mission. But then he looked at Eleanor, her eyes pleading, her face etched with worry. and he saw not a challenge to his resolve, but an act of pure, unadulterated kindness. He thought of the freezing nights, the relentless wind, the constant fear of discovery. He thought of the gnawing ache of loneliness, and he thought of Eleanor's unwavering warmth, her gentle persistence. "Eleanor," he said, his voice barely a whisper, I don't know what to say." "Say yes, Alex," she urged softly. "Just for a little while. You can leave whenever you wish, no strings attached. Just a warm place for a friend." The word friend resonated deeply within him. It was a word he hadn't truly heard directed at him in a long time, not in this context, not from someone who knew him only as Alex, the homeless man. It bypassed all his defenses, all his carefully constructed barriers. He took a deep breath. "All right, Eleanor," he conceded, a profound sense of relief washing over him, quickly followed by a strange mix of apprehension and gratitude. "Thank you. Truly." Eleanor smiled, a relieved, triumphant smile. "Wonderful. Come on, let's get you settled." The spare room was indeed small, but it was clean, cozy, and surprisingly inviting. A single bed with a patchwork quilt, a small dresser, a lamp. It was more than he could have ever dreamed of in his current circumstances. He felt a profound sense of almost childlike wonder as he sat on the edge of the bed, the softness of the mattress a luxurious novelty. That night, Alex slept in a real bed for the first time in over a year. The warmth, the safety, the quiet stillness of the room were almost overwhelming. He drifted in and out of sleep, his body slowly relaxing, shedding the constant tension of vigilance. He dreamt of open fields, of a life he had once known, a life of comfort and responsibility. The lines between his past and present began to blur, softened by the unexpected embrace of Eleanor's kindness. Days turned into weeks, and Alex found himself becoming an unofficial resident of Eleanor's spare room. He continued to help her with various tasks, becoming her trusted handyman and companion. He would still spend hours outside, observing the city, but now he had a sanctuary to return to, a warm meal awaiting him, and a friend to share his thoughts with. He felt the edges of his self-imposed detachment beginning to fray, the carefully constructed facade of homelessness slowly crumbling under the weight of genuine human connection. Eleanor, too, flourished with Alex's presence. Her loneliness receded, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose and companionship. She had someone to talk to, someone to care for, someone who genuinely listened. She saw Alex not as a homeless man, but as a kind, intelligent, deeply thoughtful individual whose circumstances, whatever they were, did not define his character. She often found herself wondering about his past, about the quest he spoke of, but she respected his privacy, waiting for him to share whatever he felt comfortable sharing. One crisp autumn morning, a letter arrived for Eleanor. It was from her bank, a rather official-looking envelope. She opened it with a sigh, expecting another statement or perhaps an update on her meager pension. But as she read the contents, her eyes widened, her jaw slowly dropping in disbelief. Alex, who was sitting at the kitchen table nursing a mug of tea, noticed her sudden pallor. "Eleanor, is everything all right?" he asked, a flicker of concern in his eyes. She looked up at him, her face pale, her hands trembling as she held the letter. "Alex, I don't know what to say," she said in shock. "It says I've received a substantial deposit, a very substantial deposit, from an anonymous donor." Her voice was barely a whisper, filled with a mix of shock and confusion. It's enough to pay off my mortgage and still leave me with a comfortable sum for years." Alex's heart gave a lurch. This was it, the moment of truth. He had orchestrated this. quietly arranging for the transfer through a shell company, ensuring it was untraceable to him directly, but always intending for Eleanor to eventually discover the source. He wanted her to feel secure, to be free of the financial anxieties that often plagued the elderly, but he hadn't anticipated the profound shock it would cause. "An anonymous donor?" he repeated, feigning surprise, though his voice was a little too steady. "Yes, but who would do such a thing? And why? I don't know anyone with that kind of money, Alex. Unless—" She looked at the letter, then at Alex, her eyes narrowing slightly, a flicker of suspicion mixing with her disbelief. "Unless it's you. But that's impossible. You're homeless."
Alex knew the game was up. The carefully constructed facade, the anonymity he had clung to, was about to shatter. He had always known this day would come, but he hadn't anticipated the weight of it, the profound significance of the revelation. He took a deep breath, preparing himself. "Eleanor," he began, his voice dropping to a low, serious tone. "There's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you a long time ago." He reached into the inner pocket of his worn jacket, a place she had never seen him access before. He pulled out a sleek, modern smartphone, a device utterly out of place with his current appearance. He unlocked it with a practiced swipe, then handed it to her, open to a specific news article. Eleanor took the phone, her hands still trembling. She looked at the screen, her eyes scanning the headline, then the accompanying photograph. Her breath hitched. The photograph was of a man, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, standing in front of a gleaming skyscraper. The man in the photograph was unmistakably Alex. The headline read, "Billionaire philanthropist Alexander Vance missing for over a year. Concerns mount." She looked from the phone to Alex, then back to the phone, her mind struggling to reconcile the two images, the disheveled, kind-hearted homeless man sitting across from her, and the powerful, enigmatic billionaire in the news article. The silence in the kitchen was deafening, punctuated only by the frantic beat of Eleanor's heart. "You're Alexander Vance?" she whispered, the name a foreign, almost mythical sound on her lips. The tech mogul? The philanthropist?" Her voice was filled with a mix of awe, shock, and a strange sense of betrayal. Alex nodded slowly, his gaze steady, regret etched on his face. "Yes, Eleanor, I am. Or rather, I was. Alexander Vance, CEO of Vance Technologies. The man who disappeared a year ago." Eleanor sank back into her chair, the letter and the phone falling onto the table, forgotten. Her mind reeled. Everything she thought she knew about Alex, about their friendship, about the nature of kindness, was suddenly turned on its head. The homeless man who had helped her after her fall, who had accepted her meager offers of tea and stew, who had slept in her spare room, was a millionaire. No, not a millionaire, a billionaire. The anonymous donor wasn't so anonymous after all. "But why?" she finally managed to articulate, her voice a fragile thread. "Why were you living on the streets? Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me pity you?" The last word was tinged with a raw hurt, a sense of having been played, however unintentionally. Alex reached across the table, his hand hovering, then gently resting on hers. "Eleanor, please believe me. I never intended for you to pity me, and I never meant to deceive you. My reasons for doing this, they were complex, and they were deeply personal." He took a deep breath, preparing himself to tell her the full story, the story he had kept hidden for over a year. "After years of building Vance Technologies, of living a life dictated by board meetings, stock prices, and endless demands, I felt empty, disconnected. I was surrounded by wealth, by power,
but I felt a profound sense of isolation. I saw the world through a very narrow lens, filtered by privilege and curated experiences. I began to question everything. What was the true value of wealth if it couldn't buy genuine connection, genuine understanding? What did it mean to be human, truly human, when stripped of all the material comforts and social status? I realized I had become a prisoner of my own success, living in a gilded cage, completely out of touch with the realities of the vast majority of people. So I made a decision, a radical one. I faked my disappearance. I arranged for my company to be run by an interim CEO, put my assets into an untouchable trust, and walked away. I wanted to experience life from the ground up, to see the world through the eyes of someone who had nothing. I wanted to understand what it meant to struggle, to be vulnerable, to depend on the kindness of strangers. It was a social experiment, yes, but it was also a deeply personal quest for meaning, for authenticity. He looked into her eyes, a profound sincerity shining through his own. And then I met you, Eleanor. On that cold day, when no one else stopped, you were the first person I truly connected with. You offered me kindness, not pity. You saw me, not my circumstances. You offered me tea, then food, then shelter, without ever asking for anything in return. You were the answer to my quest, Eleanor. You showed me that genuine kindness, pure and unconditional, still exists.
Eleanor's eyes welled up with tears, a mix of emotions swirling within her. The initial feeling of betrayal had dissipated, replaced by a profound sense of awe and a renewed understanding of the man before her. He hadn't deceived her out of malice, but out of a desperate search for truth. And in her, he had found it. "And the money?" she asked, gesturing to the letter. "Was that your way of rewarding me for my kindness?" Alex nodded, partly, but it was also a way of thanking you for showing me what I had lost and what I had found, for reminding me of the fundamental good in people. You gave me so much more than a roof over my head or a warm meal, Eleanor. You gave me back my faith in humanity. You taught me that true wealth isn't measured in bank accounts, but in the richness of human connection." He continued, "I always intended to reveal myself, to ensure that those who had shown me genuine kindness were acknowledged, not just materially, but in spirit. I wanted to ensure you were secure, that you could live out your years without financial worry, a testament to the profound impact you had on my journey." Eleanor reached for his hand, grasping it firmly. "Alex," she said, her voice thick with emotion, I don't know what to say. This is overwhelming, but I understand. I truly do. And I'm not angry, just astonished." She smiled through her tears, "And deeply, deeply grateful. Not just for the money, but for your friendship, Alex, for letting me be a part of your extraordinary quest." The revelation of Alex's true identity sent ripples through their quiet world and eventually beyond. Eleanor, initially hesitant, agreed to keep his secret for a short while longer, allowing him to carefully plan his re-emergence into the world. He spent several more weeks with Eleanor, not as a homeless man, but as Alexander Vance, though he still preferred the simple name Alex. He used his vast resources to discreetly set up a foundation dedicated to tackling homelessness and promoting acts of kindness, drawing on his personal experiences to shape its mission. When Alex finally decided to reveal himself to the world, it was a media sensation. The story of the missing billionaire who had lived as a homeless man for a year, seeking to understand the human condition, captivated the public. He gave interviews not from a lavish office, but from a modest setup, often speaking about his experiences with a profound humility that surprised many. He spoke passionately about the lessons he had learned, about the invisible struggles of the vulnerable, and about the transformative power of simple acts of kindness. And in every interview, every speech, he spoke of Eleanor. He told her story, carefully protecting her privacy by not revealing her full name or exact location, but emphasizing her role as the embodiment of the very humanity he had sought to find. He spoke of her unwavering kindness, her selfless generosity, and how her simple invitation for tea had changed the course of his life, pulling him back from the brink of a profound existential despair. The world reacted with a mixture of awe, skepticism, and inspiration. Some dismissed it as a publicity stunt, others as the eccentric whim of a rich man, but many, many more were deeply moved by his story. It sparked a global conversation about empathy, about judgment, about the true meaning of wealth and poverty. As for Eleanor, her life changed dramatically, yet subtly. The financial security Alex had provided lifted an enormous burden from her shoulders. She was able to repair her apartment, travel to see her children and grandchildren, and live her remaining years with a comfort and peace of mind she had never dared to dream of. But more than the material benefits, it was the profound friendship with Alex that enriched her life beyond measure. Alex, now back in the public eye, did not return to his old life entirely. He sold Vance Technologies, dedicating his vast fortune and his considerable intellect to his new foundation, the Human Compassion Initiative. He became a powerful advocate for the homeless, for the marginalized, using his platform to effect real change. He founded shelters that were not just places of refuge, but centers for rehabilitation, education, and empowerment. He launched programs that encouraged ordinary people to engage in acts of kindness, no matter how small, believing that these cumulative gestures could weave a stronger, more compassionate social fabric. He often visited Eleanor, not in secret anymore, but openly, as her cherished friend. They would sit in her cozy apartment, drinking Earl Grey tea, discussing the world, sharing stories, just as they had done when he was simply Alex, the homeless man. Their bond, forged in a moment of crisis and cemented by genuine connection, remained unbreakable.
Eleanor, in her quiet way, became a living testament to the power of kindness. Her story, as told by Alex, inspired countless others. People would write to her, thanking her for showing them the importance of looking beyond appearances, of extending a hand to those in need. She received letters from people who had been inspired to volunteer at shelters, to donate to food banks, to simply be more present and compassionate in their daily lives. One afternoon, many years later, Alex sat with Eleanor in her garden, the sun warm on their faces. She was frail now, her movements even slower, but her eyes still held that spark of quiet strength and wisdom. "You know, Alex," she said, her voice soft, "Arthur always used to say that every act of kindness sends out ripples, unseen but far-reaching. He would be so proud of you and of what you've done." Alex smiled, taking her hand. "And I would tell him, Eleanor, that those ripples started with you, with a shopping cart, a spilled carton of milk, and an invitation for tea." He thought back to that cold Tuesday morning, to the decision he had made to step off the bench, to offer help when no one else would. He had embarked on a journey to find humanity, to understand the true value of life without the weight of wealth. He had found it not in grand gestures or profound revelations, but in the simple, selfless act of a lonely elderly woman who saw a fellow human being in need, regardless of his circumstances.
The reward for Eleanor was not just the financial security, though that was immense. Her reward was the profound validation of her own inherent goodness, the knowledge that her small acts of kindness had sparked a chain reaction that touched countless lives. She had found a friend, a purpose, and a legacy far beyond what she could have ever imagined. And for Alex, the billionaire, his reward was even more profound. He had found himself. He had rediscovered his humanity, not through accumulating more wealth, but by shedding it all. He had learned that true richness lay not in what one possessed, but in the connections one forged, the empathy one extended, and the quiet, unassuming power of a single act of kindness. He had set out to observe humanity, and in doing so, he had become a better, more complete human being himself. His journey had come full circle, from the isolation of immense wealth to the profound connection found in shared vulnerability and selfless giving. The world, he realized, was full of hidden treasures, and the greatest of these were often found in the most unexpected places, revealed by the simplest, most genuine acts of the heart. Remember, every act of kindness, no matter how small, has the power to create ripples that can change lives, not just for the recipient, but for the giver. If this story touched your heart, consider sharing it, and perhaps look for an opportunity to extend a hand to someone in your own community. You never know whose life you might change or what incredible rewards await you. Thank you for watching.